The cold, polished weight of my wedding band felt alien on my finger tonight. A 10-carat, flawless cushion cut, a gaudy shackle Jack had insisted on after the series be funding round for a Legion living hit. My wife should look the part, he'd said, his voice dripping with a pride that was never for me, only for the reflection of himself he saw in my success. I watched the diamond scatter the light from the crystal chandelier above our Beverly Hills living room, a prison of my own exquisite making. Around me, the low hum of affluence buzzed. My home. Home. The legal documents, still cruelly said, was filled with the smell of seared scallops, expensive perfume, and the particular brand of nostalgia that clung to USC alumni. Jack's tribe, Trojans, all of them. I'd paid for the caviar, the Dom Perignon, the string quartet playing bland jazz standards. But the night belonged to him. It always did. I leaned against the marble fireplace, a silent specter in a couture Dior dress, observing. My husband, Jack Reynolds, held court by the grand piano, a tumbler of my best Macallan in his hand. His laugh, too loud, too forced, boomed across the room. He was in his element, surrounded by people who spoke the same language of frat house exploits, football glory, and the sacred, unassailable bond of the University of Southern California, class of 2016. The key is the network, always the network, Jack was saying, jabbing a finger in the air for emphasis. A group of former classmates, now mid-level executives and aspiring entrepreneurs, nodded with undue reverence. You can have the idea, but without the Trojan network to back it, to open those doors, he trailed off, shaking his head as if the very notion was pitiful. His eyes scanned the crowd, briefly landing on me by the mantel. A flicker of something irritation, embarrassment, passed over his face before he looked away. I was a dissonant note in his symphony of collegiate pride. I hadn't gone to USC. I hadn't gone to a campus at all, not in the way that mattered to him. While he was doing keg stands at Sigma Chi, I was taking online business law courses after 15-hour days building a Legion from a blog into a brand. My MBA came from the University of Late Nights and Hard Knocks, accredited by the bank and validated by market share. Jack called it a non-traditional path, a phrase he used like a polite synonym for deficient. Lenore, darling, you're hiding. The voice was saccharine, sharp as a stiletto. Chloe Davenport glided toward me, a vision in crimson silk that clung to her willowy frame. USC's former homecoming queen, Jack's college girlfriend for 4 years, and, if the whispers I'd long chosen to ignore were true, the occupant of his dorm room and subsequent off-campus apartment for most of that time. Her smile didn't reach her ice-blue eyes, just admiring the art. Chloe, I said, my voice calm. The painting she referred to was a Basquiat, authentic, one of my first major acquisitions, bought with proceeds from a licensing deal Jack had told me was too risky. She followed my gaze, her lip curling slightly. Bold choice. Jack mentioned you found it at an estate sale? How intuitive of you. The word intuitive was a weapon, implying a lucky guess rather than educated connoisseurship. Due diligence, I corrected mildly, and a solid understanding of market trajectories. It's appreciated 300% since purchase. She waved a dismissive hand, the giant emerald on it a lesser stone than mine. I noted with detached pettiness to catching the light. Numbers. Jack always said you had a head for numbers. Useful, I suppose, for the more logistical side of things. She sipped her champagne. This party is wonderful. It must be so satisfying for you, creating a beautiful backdrop for Jack's real successes. I held her gaze. His successes? The promotion, the board seat at the Alumni Association, all the fruits of that Trojan bond. She leaned in, her perfume overpowering. It's a special thing. Lenore, a shared history. You can't buy that. All the things in this house. She gestured vaguely at the curated beauty around us. Can't replicate the feeling of being 20, in love, with your whole life built on a shared dream. Those late nights in our little apartment near University Village. She let out a theatrical, wistful sigh, her voice rising just enough to turn a few nearby heads. Jack's varsity football pin is still safety pinned to my old denim jacket. I can't bring myself to throw it out. So many memories. The room's hum dipped. A circle of silence formed around us. A vacuum waiting to be filled. This was no accidental reminiscence. It was a declaration of war fired over the canapes. Jack had heard. He detached from his group, his face flushed with alcohol and adulation. He slung an arm around Chloe's shoulders, a gesture of familiarity that was a slap in my face. He didn't look at me. God, those were the days, weren't they? Chloe, he said, his voice carrying. No responsibilities, just football, classes, and he squeezed her shoulder, leaving the sentence hanging, heavy with implication. He finally turned his head toward me. His eyes, glassy and triumphant, held not an ounce of remorse, only a challenge. What's wrong, Lenore? You've got that pinched look again. Jealous of a little college nostalgia? The room was frozen. Every preppy, polished face was turned toward us, a jury of Jack's peers. I said nothing. I just looked at him. I looked at the man whose startup I'd funded when his family money dried up, the man whose lifestyle I bankrolled, whose ego I'd padded with my labor, who slept in sheets with a thread count higher than his GPA. My gaze was a question, a final, silent invoice presented for a debt he would never acknowledge. My silence infuriated him. It always did. It refused to play the role of the hysterical, uneducated wife he'd crafted for me in his narrative. What? He barked, the word too loud. He shrugged off Chloe, taking a step toward me. What is that look? You going to give us another one of your little lectures on profit margins? Because, frankly, honey, no one here cares. He swept his arm around the room. These people understand things you never will. They have a shared language, a culture. You just have spreadsheets and a good eye for throw pillows. A titter ran through the crowd. Chloe hid a smile behind her champagne flute. Jack, emboldened by the perceived support, pressed on. You're just bitter because you don't get it. You never stepped foot on a real college campus. You don't know what it means. Chloe does. He gestured to her as if presenting Exhibit A. She understands the tradition, the struggle, the Trojan spirit. What do you have? Some online certificates. You printed off the internet? He snorted. You know, sometimes I think the best thing you ever did was have the sense to marry someone who actually went to a real school. The air left the room. Even some of his sycophants looked uncomfortable. This had crossed from casual cruelty into something uglier, more fundamental. My heart wasn't racing. It was cold, a still, deep lake. This was the moment, the grand, public, long-awaited unveiling of his contempt. He'd handed me the knife himself, wrapped in his own arrogance. I let the silence stretch, let his words hang in the air, toxic and undeniable. Then, I did the one thing he never expected. I smiled, a small, serene, utterly terrifying smile. Are you quite finished, Jack? My voice was quiet, measured, and cut through the tension like a scalpel. He blinked, thrown. What? I asked if you were finished. Your oration on my intellectual and cultural poverty. It was quite a performance. You should be proud. I took a single, deliberate step forward. The crowd instinctively parted. You're right. Of course. I didn't live in a walk-up near University Village. I was busy building a company from my studio apartment while taking accredited finance courses at Wharton Online. I didn't have time for keggers. I was negotiating my first 7-figure wholesale contract. Jack's face contorted. Oh, here we go. I'm a self-made martyr speech. Spare us. You got lucky. Look, I repeated softly. I reached into the hidden slit of my gown and pulled out my phone, a sleek, encrypted device he'd never seen. His eyes locked onto it, confused. Luck is a fascinating concept. It's what people who don't understand diligence call success. I unlocked it with a glance. my thumb hovering over a single contact. You've made your position very clear. Jack, publicly and unequivocally, you've stated that my lack of a conventional undergraduate experience, the very thing you mock that makes me an unworthy partner, that you hold our shared life, and me, in such profound disdain. What are you babbling about? He sneered, but a thread of uncertainty had entered his voice. I'm accepting your proposal, I said, my voice ringing clear in the silent mansion. Maya, what? I tapped the screen and raised the phone to my ear. The click of the call connecting was audible in the stillness. A voice, crisp and professional, answered on the first ring. Ms. Thorne, we've been on standby. Proceed? Every eye was on me. Jack stared, his mouth slightly agape, the bluster draining from him like air from a punctured balloon. Victoria, I said, my eyes never leaving my husband's. Initiate the Phoenix Protocol. Immediately. He just gave us the perfect opening. I want the papers drawn up tonight, all of them, and send a team to the house. Now, I ended the call. The silence was absolute, then fractured into a storm of whispers. What is this? Jack stammered, his face pale. Who is that? What papers? That was Victoria Sterling. Of Sterling, Cox, and Valdez, I said, placing the phone back in its hidden pocket. My lead counsel. The papers, Jack, are for divorce. You offered it as a challenge. Mind if we divorce? I'm calling your bluff. I mind very much staying married to you for another second. Panic, raw and undisguised, flashed in his eyes. You're bluffing. You're hysterical. You can't. I believe her exact words were. You just have spreadsheets and a good eye for throw pillows. A cool. New voice interjected from the doorway. All heads swiveled. Victoria Sterling stood there, a formidable silhouette in a severe black suit, flanked by two associates holding slim titanium briefcases. She looked like vengeance in Prada heels. The party guests fell back as she walked through them, a shark parting minnows, a fascinating characterization of the founder and CEO of a company currently valued at just under $300 million. Victoria continued, stopping beside me. She didn't look at Jack. She looked at the assembled crowd, and one that will play very poorly in the discovery phase. I'm sure. Jack's jaw worked soundlessly. He looked from Victoria to me, his world tilting on its axis. Lenore, honey, this is crazy. You're overreacting. It was a joke. Everyone knows that. He appealed to the room, but the faces that met his were a mixture of shock, morbid fascination, and sudden, calculating distance. The vultures were sensing a new carcass. A joke, I echoed. Like your 4-year Tungjir with Chloe was a joke? Like my life's work is a joke? Like I am a joke? I shook my head, a profound weariness settling over me. The joke is over. Jack, he stumbled forward, his hand outstretched, not in affection, but in a frantic grab for my phone. Give me that. Who else are you calling? You can't do this. I let him snatch it. He fumbled with the screen, his drunk, clumsy fingers trying to access it. It was futile. He stared at the lock screen, and his face, if possible, went whiter. It wasn't a picture of us. It was a live feed of the Elysian Living flagship store's real-time sales dashboard. And in the corner, the notification bar was a scrolling ticker of unread messages. Names flashed there, visible for a half-second before he dropped the phone like it was red-hot. Names he knew, names he'd tried to get meetings with for years. A senior partner at Sequoia, the CEO of a Fortune 50 retailer, the dean of USC's Marshall School of Business. His eyes, wide with a dawning, horrifying comprehension, met mine. What? Who are these people? Why are they texting you? Victoria answered for me. She reached into her associate's briefcase and pulled out a thick, bound sheaf of documents. With a sound like a gunshot, she slapped it down on the grand piano, right on top of Jack's abandoned drink coaster. These, Mr. Reynolds, she said, her voice slicing through the room, are the preliminary filings. based on the prenuptial agreement you so wisely insisted upon, a document which, I should add, my client's previous counsel advised her was excessively favorable to you, but which she signed in good faith that you are entitled to very little, especially in light of the demonstrable emotional abuse and financial malfeasance we'll be presenting. Jack stared at the papers, at the legalese that spelled the end of his golden ticket. He looked back at me, the man who had built his identity on being the educated, pedigreed husband to the pretty, self-made decorator. The facade was crumbling, and beneath it was just a scared, small man who'd bitten the hand that fed him, only to discover it was attached to a lioness. Lenore, he whispered, the name a plea, all the arrogance, the condescension, the Trojan pride, was gone, replaced by pure, unadulterated terror. You can't. We can talk about this. Please. I looked at him, at Chloe, who was shrinking toward the curtains, at the sea of stunned faces that had witnessed his coronation and his collapse in the span of 10 minutes. I smoothed the front of my Dior gown, a suit of armor I hadn't known I was wearing until tonight. There's nothing to talk about. Jack, I said, my voice finally carrying the ice that had lived in my heart for years. The conversation is over. You're no longer my problem. Victoria will see you out. I turned and walked away, not toward the shattered remains of my marriage, but toward the grand French doors leading to the terrace, to the night beyond. The first move was complete. The cage was open, and the Phoenix protocol had just begun. The silence in the back of the Rolls-Royce was absolute, broken only by the soft whir of the climate control. Victoria Sterling sat across from me, her tablet casting a blue glow on her sharp features. The gilded facade of the house, now buzzing with the chaotic aftermath we'd left behind, shrank in the tinted window. The first wave is complete, Victoria said, not looking up. Social media is already trending. Hashtag Beverly Hills breakup. The narrative is forming, and it's not kind to him. The spreadsheets and throw pillows clip has gone viral. Good, I said, my voice steady. The adrenaline was gone, replaced by a cold, clarifying focus. Initiate phase 2. Full forensic accounting. I want every transaction, every shell company, every hidden debit. Victoria finally looked at me, a glint of professional admiration in her eyes. You're sure? The discovery process will be invasive. For both of you. He made it public. Victoria, I'm just taking it to discovery. I stared out at the neon blur of Sunset Boulevard. He told a room full of people my life's work was decorative. Let's see how his own ledger holds up under the same light. 2 days later, I sat in the austere, modern conference room of Sterling, Cox, and Valdez. The walls were bare steel and glass. There were no throw pillows here. Victoria stood at the head of the table, a digital projector humming. Okay, Lenore, let's talk about Jack's understanding of Trojan financial spirit. She clicked a remote. A spreadsheet filled the screen. My personal accountant, a quiet man named Amir, cleared his throat. This is the joint liquidity account, the one you used for household and shared investments. I recognized the column of transfers. Modest sums, 5 to 10,000 every few months. The memo line read, Art Venture LLC capital call, Art Venture LLC. Victoria said, Jack's passion project, a gallant effort to support the arts. He said, an investment in culture. She clicked again. A new document appeared, the operating agreement for Art Venture LLC. The listed members, Jackson Reynolds and Chloe Davenport. The air in the room grew colder. Capital calls, Amir said, pointing. But if we follow the money from Art Ventures account, another click, bank statements, the money from our joint account was transferred. Then, within days, paid out as consulting fees and property leasing to a separate entity. A final click revealed a lease agreement for a 1.200 square foot apartment in Venice Beach. Tenant, Chloe Davenport. Paid for by Art Venture LLC. Management fee, So my money, I said, my voice eerily calm, was paying his mistress's rent, and he called it an art investment, a tax-deductible one. Initially, Amir noted drily, though that deduction will be challenged. Aggressively, a flash, sharp and unwanted. Jack, 2 years ago, excitedly explaining the concept over dinner. It's a new fund, Lenore, supporting emerging artists. It's about legacy, not just returns. You wouldn't understand the art world's nuances. And me, tired from closing the deal on the New York flagship, just nodding, signing the check to make the conversation stop, to buy peace. Victoria moved on. Now, contrast, the screen split. On one side, Jack's art venture bleeding money. On the other, a list of private equity holdings under the name L. Thorn Holdings LLC. I leaned forward. This was my secret garden, the portfolio I'd built with the first real money Elysian ever made. Before Jack was even a factor, the Sierra Verde water filtration startup. Victoria read, "You took an advisory equity stake in 2021. Quietly, they just landed the exclusive Department of Defense contract for field units. Your initial $250,000 is now valued at approximately $5.2 million. Another line, a 3% early stake in Cafina, the subscription cold brew company, acquired by Starbucks last month. Your return, 2.000%. Another, a silent partnership in Ascendant, the electric vertical takeoff aircraft developer. You're their single largest private angel." She listed them, one after another, a symphony of shrewd, silent bets made while Jack was bragging at USC alumni mixers about his killer instinct. Total current valuation of these holdings, Amir said, a hint of pride in his voice, conservatively estimated at $87 million. Separate property, accrued before the marriage, not subject to community property laws. He has no claim. The conference room door swung open. Meredith, Victoria's steely-eyed assistant, stepped in. "Ms. Davenport is here. She's insistent. Says it's about a time-sensitive financial matter concerning Mr. Reynolds." Victoria and I exchanged a look. Right on cue. I murmured, "Send her in." Chloe looked like she'd been crying, but the tears seemed strategic, smudging her mascara just so. She ignored Victoria and Amir, her eyes locking on me with a desperate fury. "You have to call off the dogs. Lenore," she hissed, dispensing with any pretense. "I don't have dogs. Chloe, I have attorneys and forensic accountants. They're more thorough. This isn't a game. You're ruining him. He did that himself. I'm just finalizing the paperwork." She clutched her Birkin bag like a life preserver. "He made promises, financial promises, to me. He said once the alumni board seat was secure, he'd leave you, that we'd be together. He said the prenup was a joke, that you'd never have the guts to enforce it." A cold knot tightened in my stomach, not from heartbreak, but from the sheer, staggering audacity of his stupidity. "And you believed him. He loves me." The words were a shriek, echoing in the sterile room. "We have a history you could never understand. He said you were convenient, a pretty face who got lucky with a website. He needed your money to get started. But I was his real future, his equal." The word hung in the air. Equal, based on a 4-year degree and a varsity pin. "His financial promises to you are not my concern," I said, my voice flat. Her expression shifted, the desperation hardening into something calculating. She fumbled in her bag and pulled out her phone. "Aren't they? What if I have proof? Proof of his intentions. He told me everything. About how he felt trapped. About your limitations." She tapped the screen and held it up. A voice recording app was visible. He said, and I quote, "Once the new fund closes, I'll be set. I can finally leave Lenore and her tacky empire behind. We'll be together. Chloe, I promise." She lowered the phone. "How do you think that will play in court? A grieving, manipulated husband, trapped in a loveless marriage to a decorator. Victoria didn't move. Amir studied his nails. I simply stared at her. Are you attempting to extort my client, Ms. Davenport? Victoria asked, her tone bored. I'm providing context. Chloe snapped. For a settlement, a generous one, for me, or this gets leaked to TMZ. The poor, beloved Trojan golden boy, driven to infidelity by his cold, social climbing wife. I leaned back in my chair. Play it. What? The recording. Play the whole thing. Let's hear the context. A flicker of panic in her eyes. I don't have to play it for you here. My lawyer. Play it. Chloe. I repeated, my voice leaving no room for negotiation. Or this conversation is over, and you can take your context to the blogs. See how far it gets you. Her hand trembled slightly. She pressed play. Jack's voice, slurred, filled the room. Once the money's free, baby. She's clueless. Thinks APL is a pill you take. It's almost sad, but you get it. You're a real USC woman. You and me. We're the same. We speak the same language. She's just background noise. Pretty background noise. But still, there was a pause. The sound of ice clinking in a glass. Then his voice again, lower, dripping with a contempt that made even Victoria's eyebrow twitch. Honestly, keeping her around is exhausting. The questions, trying to talk about my work. It's like explaining calculus to a golden retriever. A rich, hot golden retriever who pays the bills. But still, Chloe stopped the recording. A triumphant, brittle smile on her face. See, the cold knot in my stomach had dissolved into a pool of icy clarity. I looked at Victoria and gave a single, almost imperceptible nod. Victoria picked up a sleek remote from the table and pointed it at a different screen on the wall. Thank you for that, Ms. Davenport. It's always helpful to have the opponent's evidence entered voluntarily. She pressed a button. Security footage appeared. High definition. Color. The timestamp was from 3 months ago. The location was the wine cellar in our Beverly Hills home. Jack and Chloe were there, his hand on her waist. He was sober. Chloe's voice, tinny from the speaker. But what if she finds out? About us? About the apartment? Jack, shrugging, taking a bottle of Petrus. She won't. She's busy with her fabric swatches and mood boards. And even if she did, so what? What's she going to do? She's nothing without me. I gave her credibility. Without my name, my network. She's just a girl with a Pinterest page. He leaned in, kissed her cheek. You're my real prize. This, he gestured with the bottle, encompassing the cellar, the house, the life. This is just the waiting room. On the screen, Chloe preened. In the conference room, the blood drained from her face. The waiting room. I echoed softly. I looked at her. He was talking about you. Chloe, you're the so what? I'm the waiting room. Seems he has a habit of monetizing the women in his life. I was the bank. You were the tax-deductible distraction. This is illegal surveillance. Chloe spluttered, pointing a shaking finger at the screen. It's my home, I said. The security system I paid for. The footage is admissible, and it paints a somewhat different picture than your edited audio snippet. Doesn't it? Not a tormented man, but a contemptuous opportunist. And you're not a blameless victim. You're a knowing accomplice to the misuse of marital assets. That apartment, that's fraud. Chloe, Victoria slid a single sheet of paper across the table. A cease and desist. You will delete that recording and any copies. You will make no further public statements regarding Miss Thorne or these proceedings. You will vacate the Venice Beach property within 72 hours. In return, we will not, at this time, pursue civil action against you for conspiracy to commit fraud. This is a one-time offer. It expires when you walk out that door. Chloe stared at the paper, her bravado utterly shattered. She looked from the damning video to my impassive face. Without a word, she snatched a pen from the table, scrawled her signature, and fled the room, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft click. The silence she left behind was profound. Amir let out a low whistle. Well, that was predictable. Victoria finished. She turned to me. It's a good thing you had those cameras. Lenore. I didn't answer for a moment. I was seeing another flash. Me, pregnant for the second time, hunched over the bathroom sink, sick and exhausted. Jack, standing in the doorway, holding his tie. Another charity gala? Can you handle it? Maybe you should just stay home. You look pale. Besides, the dean of the business school will be there. You wouldn't know what to talk to him about anyway. I'd lost that pregnancy a week later. He'd been at a networking retreat in Napa. I'd installed the comprehensive security system the next day. Not because I suspected an affair, because I suddenly felt unsafe in my own home. And I needed to see all the angles. I had to see all the angles. I said finally, my voice quiet. I looked back at the spreadsheet, still glowing on the main screen. What's the final number? Amir? The one that will hurt him the most. Amir typed quickly. A new figure appeared, isolated in the center of the screen. It was the current, fully diluted, pre-IPO valuation of Elysian Living Inc. $285.000.000. 285 million, I said, letting the number hang in the air. And he thought I was a girl with a Pinterest page. Victoria allowed herself a thin, razor-sharp smile. The discovery package goes to his attorney tomorrow. It will include the Art Venture LLC analysis, the initial valuation for Elysian, and a formal notice of our intent to seek all legal fees due to demonstrable bad faith and financial malfeasance on his part. She paused. He's going to see this number. Lenore, for the first time, he's going to understand what he's actually losing. I stood up, walking to the window. The city sprawled below, a circuit board of ambition and failure. Somewhere out there, Jack was likely in a bar, telling some sympathetic soul a revised version of the night, casting himself as the wronged party. Good, I said, watching the headlights stream along the freeway like tracer fire. Let him see it. Let him look at that number and finally understand the calculus. I turned from the window, meeting Victoria's gaze. Send it. The mediation was set for a conference room in a Century City high-rise, the kind of place where peace was brokered at $700 an hour. I arrived with Victoria. Jack arrived with his lawyer, a man named Richard Moore, who had the polished, aggressive sheen of a former district attorney. He looked like he ate witnesses for breakfast. Jack looked like he hadn't slept. He wore a suit that was just a hair too rumpled. His Trojan tie a defiant slash of cardinal and gold. His eyes, bloodshot, fixed on me with a mix of hatred and a new, unsettling confusion. The financial discovery package had been delivered. He'd seen the number. Shall we begin? The mediator, a weary-looking woman named Carol, began. The goal today is to see if we can find a path forward on asset division without the need for prolonged and expensive litigation. Richard Moore leaned forward, hands clasped. My client's goal is simple: a fair division of the marital estate, respecting the prenuptial agreement, of course, but also the substantial, non-monetary contribution she made to the marital partnership. His social capital, his network, his reputation, these were instrumental in building the perception of the Elysian Living brand. I almost smiled. They were going with the brand ambassador defense. Victoria didn't blink. Could you quantify that social capital? Mr. Moore? In dollars, preferably. My client's ledgers are quite precise. Jack slammed a hand on the table. You know what she means. The contacts, the alumni network, the USC connection. That's what gives a brand like Elysian legitimacy, a sense of heritage, something you can't get from a website and some online tutorials. His voice echoed in the sterile room. He was parroting a line they'd rehearsed, but the panic beneath it was raw. Are you suggesting, Victoria said, her tone lethally calm, that without your fraternity pin and your football stories, Elysian Living, that a company founded, built, and solely operated by Ms. Thorne before your marriage, would be worth $285 million less? I'm suggesting her empire is built on fluff. Jack shot back, his face flushing. It's home decor. Throw pillows and curtains. Might work, gave it weight. Gave her access to rooms she never could have gotten into on her own. The country clubs, the charity boards, the real business conversations. She was the pretty face. I was the backbone. Carol, the mediator, looked pained. Mr. Reynolds, personal attacks are not. It's not an attack. It's a fact. He turned to me, his gaze pleading and furious. Tell them. Lenore, you know it's true. That deal with the Brentwood Country Club? Who got you in the room? Me. My father's membership. The Hamptons pop-up? That was my roommate from business school. Paul Anderson. Every major partnership you have is because of a hand issue, a relationship I cultivated. I let the silence hang. I looked at Richard Moore. Is it your client's formal position that his primary marital contribution was as a social liaison? Moore shifted, sensing a trap but unable to see its edges. We're stating that the value of the marital asset, the company that was significantly enhanced by my client's pedigree and connections, a factor not accounted for in a simple, boilerplate prenup. I see. I nodded slowly. I reached into my portfolio, not for a financial document, but for a simple, leather-bound folder. I slid it across the table to Carol. Perhaps we should examine the provenance of those connections. Carol opened it. The first page was a letter on crisp, embossed stationery, University of Southern California, Marshall School of Business. Jack leaned forward, squinting. What's this? A letter of gratitude, I said, from Dean Eleanor Walsh, dated 18 months ago, for a transformative gift to establish the Elysian Digital Futures Lab focused on integrating e-commerce platforms with sustainable supply chain management, a pet project of the Dean's. I believe, one you mentioned she was desperate to fund after that alumni dinner you took me to. The one where you said I wouldn't understand the academic jargon. I looked at him. I understood the proposal, so I funded it, quietly, through a donor-advised fund. The Dean and I have had a standing quarterly call for over a year. Jack's mouth fell open. You what? But that's my Dean, my school. And Paul Anderson, your roommate? I prompted. Carol flipped the page. A copy of a joint venture agreement. Elysian Living Anderson Hospitality Group. The Hamptons pop-up. I said, Paul didn't take the meeting because of you. Jack, he took it because my logistics team presented a revenue-sharing model that increased his per square foot yield by 30%. He told me, and I quote, your husband's a great guy, but you're the one who speaks the language of the PL. You introduced us. I closed the deal, not with a handshake, with a business plan. Richard Moore was scribbling frantically. Jack looked like he'd been hit in the stomach. The Brentwood Country Club. I continued, my voice like ice. I didn't need your father's membership. I needed the board to approve an exterior renovation that wouldn't violate historical codes. I got the meeting because I'm on the board of the California Preservation Foundation, a position I was invited to after I personally funded the restoration of the Gamble House carriage house, something I did after you told me the architecture was quaint and the donation was a waste. I leaned forward slightly. You were my plus one at that fundraiser. Jack, not the other way around. The room was dead silent. Jack's face was ashen. You never said, he stammered. You never asked. I replied, you were too busy explaining things to me, too busy being the backbone. Why would I interrupt? I was learning. I was listening to your deals, your contacts, your problems, and then I went and solved them. My way. You got the credit at the cocktail parties. I got the equity, the board seats, and the relationships. I tapped the folder. There's more. The head of the USC Alumni Investment Committee, the lead partner at the venture firm that backed your friend's failed crypto play, the owner of the Malibu surf brand you're so fond of. I have relationships with all of them, not as Jack Reynolds' wife, as Lenore Thorne, CEO, They don't return your calls because you're a fun guy from the Sigma Chi house. Jack, they return mine because I move markets. He stared at me, a stranger wearing his wife's face, the foundation of his entire identity, the Trojan, the networker, the guy who knew people that was crumbling to dust. And I had been the one quietly loosening the mortar for years. This is irrelevant. Richard, more blustered, but the fight had gone out of his voice. These are attempts to embarrass my client. No, Carol the mediator said, her eyes on me with dawning respect. This is evidence that the social capital you're attempting to monetize was, in fact, generated and maintained by Ms. Thorne. You're not claiming a share of an asset you helped build. You're asking for a commission on a network you merely introduced her to, but which she alone cultivated into tangible value. The court will see it that way. I assure you. Jack stood up so fast his chair screeched. This is bullshit. You're twisting everything. You lied. You pretended to be this quiet little decorator while you were scheming behind my back. I finally stood as well, meeting his rage with a terrifying calm. I didn't scheme. Jack, I worked. I learned. I built. You were just too busy looking down on me to look at me. You needed a quiet little decorator to make yourself feel big. So I let you have that. It was the most efficient strategy. I glanced at my watch. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a call with the USC Board of Trustees. They want my thoughts on the new entrepreneurship curriculum. It seems they value my non-traditional perspective. I turned to leave, Victoria gathering her things beside me. You'll regret this. Jack shouted at my back, his voice cracking. You think you've won? You're nothing without that ring. You're a nobody, a fraud. I paused at the door, not looking back. The only fraud in this room, I said softly, is the man who thought a diploma was a substitute for a spine. The loss in the mediation room sent Jack spiraling. He went to the one place he thought he still had power, the court of public opinion, or at least, the court of Trojan alumni. He gave a tearful, candid interview to a USC-focused podcast, The Trojan Talk, painting himself as the heartbroken husband, blindsided by a ruthless, social climbing wife who never understood the sacred bond of the university. She never got it. His voice wavered digitally. The traditions, the legacy, to her, it was all just context to be used. She saw my alma mater as a Rolodex. It broke my heart. Chloe, desperate and vengeful, seized the moment. From a new, anonymous Instagram account, she launched the hashtag Trojan wife versus gold digger. She posted grainy, filtered photos of their college days, Jack in his football jersey, her in his Letterman jacket, captions dripping with nostalgia. Real love versus a transaction. Some girls marry for a house in Beverly Hills. Some of us love the boy in the dorm. Her followers, a sad collection of fellow alumni hangers-on, ate it up for about 6 hours. Then, the counterattack began. Not from me, from my network. The first post came from Darren Des Johnson, All-American wide receiver, now a sports analyst for ESPN. He shared Jack's podcast clip with a simple caption. Funny, the only Trojan who ever helped me with my finances was at Lenore. Thorne sat me down after my rookie year, told me to ignore my idiot agent, Mike, and set up the trust that's still paying my mom's bills. Jack just asked me for tickets. Hashtag know your playbook. Hashtag grateful his millions of followers took notice. Then, a LinkedIn article from the CEO of a major Silicon Valley cloud provider, a USC alum. The title, Why I Invest in Founders. Not pedigrees. It didn't name Jack, but it praised a visionary in the home goods space who'd taken his online MBA course and applied the principles with more rigor and success than any traditional graduate I've seen. He tagged me, the owner of the Surf brand, a legend in the action sports world, posted a video from his Malibu shop. Just heard some noise about my friend Lenore. He said, squinting in the sun, she's the one who restructured this business when it was about to wipe out, saved 50 local jobs, taught me more about PLS than my fancy business degree. Anyone saying she's not the real deal can fight me. Or better yet, let's compare tax returns." He grinned and shot a shaka sign. The coup de grace came from the Marshall School of Business's official Instagram. They posted a sleek graphic. "Marshall celebrates innovative alumni wherever they learn." It featured a picture of me taken at the Digital Futures Lab opening, with a quote from Dean Walsh. Lenore Thorne exemplifies the entrepreneurial spirit we champion. Her path reminds us that talent and drive, not just tradition, define the Trojan family. We are proud to count her among our most impactful supporters. The comments exploded. The alumni world, fiercely protective of its own brand, swiftly turned. Jack wasn't just attacking his wife, he was attacking a validated, donating success story the school had just publicly embraced. The hashtag TrojanWife hashtag was flooded with comments calling Jack an embarrassment, a leech, a stain on the Trojan spirit. Chloe's anonymous account was doxxed and reported into oblivion within a day. The final blow came in family court, at a hearing for a temporary financial restraining order. Jack, representing himself in a fit of pique after firing Richard Moore, stood before the judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s. "Your Honor," he said, his voice trembling with self-righteous anger. "This is about principle. It's about the value of a real education, of a shared culture. She's a hacker. She bypassed the system. You can't just buy your way into a legacy. There's a right way to do things." The judge, Judge Eleanor Wilkins, peered at him over her glasses. She had been silent, reviewing a document on her bench. She looked from him to me, then back to him. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice dry as desert sand. "This court is concerned with community property law, not college rivalries. But since you've raised the issue of education and legitimacy," she closed the folder. "I completed my Juris Doctor at Stanford. However, in the interest of staying current, I also serve as a guest reviewer for Harvard Law's online comparative jurisprudence program. Last semester, I reviewed a particularly outstanding thesis on cross-border intellectual property frameworks in digital commerce." She paused, her eyes locking on Jack. It was submitted by one Lenore Thorne. It received the highest mark in the cohort. She leaned forward. "So, from where I sit, Mr. Reynolds, the only person in this courtroom bypassing the system is you. By failing to recognize that the system you worship has already evolved to include people like your wife. Restraining order granted. Next case." Jack stood there, utterly hollowed out. The last pillar of his pride, the sanctity of the traditional path, the unassailable authority of the right kind of degree, had just been dismantled by a judge with an online side gig. He wasn't just losing money or a wife. He was losing his place in the world. As he shuffled out of the courtroom, a process server stepped forward, bypassing him entirely and handing an envelope to Victoria. "What's this?" she asked. "Compliments of the USC Alumni Association Board," the server said, a formal notice. Victoria opened it, a smile touching her lips. She showed it to me. It was a letter, signed by the board president. It informed Jack Reynolds that, following a review, his annual Young Trojan Award was being rescinded due to conduct unbecoming of a Trojan and detrimental to the university's values. The award had been the proudest moment of his life. Now, it was just another piece of paper, null and void. The horse he'd ridden in on had not only thrown him, it had joined the other side. A week after the courtroom debacle, Jack was holed up in a short-term rental in Marina del Rey, a soulless glass box that smelled of other people's air freshener. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the hum of the mini fridge and the relentless ping of his phone, colleagues distancing themselves, friends offering awkward condolences, and the final, brutal email from the Alumni Association's president. The trophy, a cheap brass statue of a Trojan warrior, sat on the counter, looking more like a tombstone. He'd fired Richard Moore. The man was a failure. He needed a shark, Someone who wouldn't be cowed by Lenore's icy composure or her battalion of lawyers. He'd found Mick Dobbs. Mick's website promised aggressive, no-holds-barred representation for the disadvantaged spouse. His ad showed a pit bull in a suit. Jack liked that. Mick, a bulldog of a man with a voice like gravel, listened to Jack's rant in the rental's sterile living room, his small eyes taking in the empty takeout containers, the suit jacket slung over a chair. So, she's smart, Mick grunted, cutting Jack off. Smarter than you. Apparently, the social capital argument is dead. We need to find dirt. Hidden assets. You're sure she's not stashing cash somewhere? Offshore? Shell companies? Jack paced. How would I know? She handled all the boring stuff. Taxes. Investments. I was the face. The vision. Mick's expression suggested vision was a synonym for idiot. Right. Well, my guy is good. Ex-IRS. Ex-private intelligence. If she's moved a dime, he'll find it. But it's not cheap. Bill me. Jack said, a hollow echo of his old bravado. He still had some credit left. Literally, 2 days later, Mick and his investigator, a gaunt, silent man named Carl, were back. Carl had a tablet, his fingers tapping with grim efficiency. Jack felt a surge of hope. They'd found something. Something she'd hidden. Something that would prove she was the fraud he knew. In his gut, she had to be. Okay, Mick said, not smiling. We found the hidden assets. Jack's heart leapt. I knew it. Where? The Caymans? Switzerland? Carl spoke, his voice monotone. Not hidden from the IRS. Hidden from you. He turned the tablet around. On it was a satellite image of a rugged, breathtaking stretch of coastline. Malibu. A specific, iconic bluff. The one Jack had pointed to for years, dreaming of building his ultimate Trojan retreat. The one Lenore had gently dismissed, saying, the geotechnical reports are a nightmare. Jack, it's a money pit. The feng shui is all wrong. The Paragon Point parcel. Carl said, you tried to buy it in 2021. The seller refused your offer, said they had a better one from a trust. Yeah, some anonymous asshole outbid me. Jack snarled. I never found out who. Carl swiped. A document appeared. A certificate of title. Owner. Ether Holdings. Ltd. A Cayman Islands entity. He swiped again. A complex corporate ownership chart. A Russian doll of LLCs. Carl's bony finger traced the lines, drilling down through layers. Ether Holdings was owned by Cypriot Shell, which was owned by a Delaware holding company, which was ultimately owned by a single beneficiary trust. The Lenore Thorne Irrevocable Trust, dated 5 years ago, a year before Jack had even laid eyes on the property. Jack felt the room tilt. No, that's not, she said. It was a bad investment. She talked about soil erosion, water rights. She talked you out of it, Mick said, his voice flat. Well, she bought it out from under you. Through a Byzantine structure designed for one thing, opacity. My guy had to dig deep. This is sophisticated. Carl swiped again. A new document. City planning permits. Approved last month. Not for a private home. For a campus. The Elysian Institute for Applied Design Innovation. Renderings showed low-slung, sustainable buildings hugging the cliff. A note on the cover sheet. Focused on non-traditional, project-based learning pathways. Founding patron, Lenore Thorne. She's building a school. Jack whispered, the words ash in his mouth. On my land. It was never your land. Mick corrected, mercilessly. And that's not all. The screen filled with financials. A summary. Carl read them off like a grocery list. Through various blind trusts and holding companies, Ms. Thorne holds a 12% non-voting stake in Fortitude Brewing, your favorite craft brewery. The one you always said you wanted to invest in. Acquired 3 years ago. A 7% stake in the VC firm that just funded your friend Ben's drone startup. The one that rejected you as an investor. A controlling interest in the boutique that makes the ties you wear. The one you brag about discovering. Carl looked up. Shall I continue? There's a sports agency. a vineyard in Sonoma, and a significant piece of a patent holding company that owns the IP for the smart home system in your former, in the Beverly Hills house. Jack sank into a cheap IKEA chair. It groaned under his weight. Every pillar of his identity, every trophy of his supposed taste, every symbol of his aspirational self was stamped with her invisible mark of ownership. He'd been living in a museum of her success, curating exhibits he thought proved his own brilliance. Why? The word was a choked gasp. Why would she do this? Just to mock me? Mick shrugged. Business. Diversification. Control. Take your pick. The point is, the pretty decorator with a Pinterest page owns a chunk of half the things you think make you interesting. The discovery process is going to be a bloodbath. Her lawyers will paint you as a kept man, a dilettante living off the largesse of a wife you publicly derided as uneducated. The judge will eat you alive. Just then, Jack's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. It was Chloe. Jack, we need to talk. It's urgent. About us. About the baby. The world, already spinning, fell away completely. A baby? A shred of desperate, insane hope clawed at him. Leverage. A connection. A way to force Lenore to the table. To make her see. He didn't reply. He just stood, grabbed his keys, and drove to the cheap downtown hotel where Chloe was now staying. Mick's warnings fading behind the roar in his ears. Chloe's room was a mess of designer suitcases and desperation. She looked older. The carefully maintained veneer cracked. You got my text, she said, her voice trembling. A baby? Jack demanded, not stepping fully inside. Is it true? She placed a hand on her flat stomach. A gesture he recognized from bad movies. I'm 6 weeks. It's yours. Jack, it's our second chance. Our family. His mind raced. A child. His child. Lenore would never. She couldn't be so cold as to ignore that. Not with a memory. Vicious and unbidden. Sliced through the calculation. Lenore. Years ago. Pale and silent in a hospital bed. The doctor speaking in soft, regretful tones. An incomplete pregnancy. A blighted ovum. The medical terms did nothing to mute the hollow grief in her eyes. He'd stood there, awkward, feeling useless. Then, later, at home, as she lay curled in their dark bedroom, he'd said the wrong thing. The only thing his panic could muster. Maybe it's for the best. With your schedule and honestly, honey, would you even know how to be a present mom? You're so focused on your work. She hadn't responded. She'd just turned her face to the wall. He'd told himself she was being dramatic, that it was nature's way. He'd gone to a Lakers game with clients the next night, needed to clear his head. He shook the memory off, focusing on Chloe, on the possibility. This changes everything. He breathed. It does, she said, a cunning glint entering her eyes. She can't just cut you off now. Not if you're going to be a father. It's a new family to support. We can demand more, a lot more, for the baby's future. The word we hung in the air. He looked at her, at the performative vulnerability, and saw the same calculation he'd just been running. This wasn't about a child. It was a tool. And for the first time, he saw Chloe not as a trophy or a comfort, but as a liability with a ticking clock. We need to be smart, he said, his voice low. We can't go in guns blazing. We need a plan, medical records, proof. I have the doctor's note, she said quickly, pulling a folded paper from her purse. But Jack, I'm scared, and I'm alone. I lost the gallery because of her. My reputation. I need security. For us. For the baby. He understood. Money. Up front. How much? She named a figure. It was a deposit on a nice house in a good school district. It was also most of what he had left in his rapidly draining personal account. He felt sick, but the idea of a child, of a legacy that was truly his, not filtered through Lenore's shadow, it was a lifeline. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll get it. We'll fight her together. He left, a strange brew of dread and elation churning in his gut. He'd get the money. He'd use the baby as a wedge. he'd get what was his. The wedge strategy lasted precisely 48 hours. He'd scraped the money together and was about to wire it to Chloe when his phone rang. An unknown LA number. Jack Reynolds. It was a woman's voice. Cool. Professional. Utterly unfamiliar. Who is this? My name is Anya. I'm a physician's assistant at Westside Women's Clinic. I'm calling regarding a patient. Chloe Davenport. She listed you as the emergency contact for a procedure scheduled for this morning. The floor dropped away. Procedure? What procedure? A pause. The rustle of paper. A surgical termination. It was completed at 10 a.m. The patient is in recovery. She asked us to notify you. The phone slipped from his hand, clattering on the cheap tile floor of the rental. The baby. The leverage. The future. It was a lie. A transaction. A down payment on a lie. He drove, a red haze of rage, clouding his vision. Back to Chloe's hotel. He didn't bother knocking. Just pounded on the door until she opened it, wrapped in a hotel robe, her face pale but composed. You bitch, he snarled, shoving his way in. You lied. You used me. She didn't flinch. She walked to the dresser, picked up an envelope, and held it out. It was a necessary precaution. The doctor's note was real. Jack, I was pregnant, but let's be honest. You're broke. You're losing everything. What kind of life is that for a child? For me? Her voice was chillingly rational. I took care of the problem. Now, we take care of the opportunity. We go to Lenore. Together, we tell her I lost the baby because of the stress she caused, the emotional distress. We sue for intentional infliction. We settle. We split it. He stared at her, truly seeing her for the first time. Not the co-ed fantasy, but a mercenary as bankrupt as he was. You're insane. She'll destroy you. Not if the story is good enough. Chloe said, a brittle smile on her lips. The heartbroken father, the grieving other woman, the cruel, barren wife driving us to tragedy. The press will eat it up. She'll pay to make it go away. He laughed then, a raw, broken sound. You have no idea who you're dealing with. She's not some scared society wife. She's a glacier. You can't guilt a glacier. We'll see, Chloe said, her eyes hardening. I'm not walking away with nothing. Jack, either we do this my way, or I go to the tabloids with everything. The apartment, the money, the baby. I'll paint you as the villain who pressured me into it. Your name will be mud. Worse than mud. She threw the envelope at him. It contained the fake doctor's note and a positive pregnancy test. My lawyer's number is on the back. Call me when you're ready to be smart. He left, the envelope burning in his hand. He drove aimlessly, finally ending up at a dive bar in El Segundo. He was on his third whiskey when his father's name flashed on his phone. Harrison Reynolds, 3. Old money, old school, perpetually disappointed. He almost didn't answer, but habit and a childish flicker of hope made him hit accept. Dad, Jackson. The voice was like dry ice. I just got off the phone with Eleanor Walsh. And with my broker. Care to explain why the Dean of Marshall is politely disinviting me from the Capital Campaign Committee? And why my portfolio has taken a noticeable hit due to the sudden devaluation of several startups you assured me were Trojan safe? Jack closed his eyes. It's a misunderstanding. Lenore. I know what Lenore is doing. His father cut him off. I've known for years. Did you think I didn't look into the woman my son was marrying? I saw the corporate filings, the trust structures. She's a savant. Jackson, a once-in-a-generation mind for building quietly and owning completely. And you treated her like a show pony, an ornament. The whiskey turned to acid in Jack's stomach. You knew? And you never said anything? I thought it might be good for you. His father said, the disdain palpable even over the phone. A reality check, a lesson in humility. Instead, you doubled down on the arrogance. You made a fool of yourself, and by extension, of this family. And now you've managed to turn the one asset in your life of actual, substantive worth into your most formidable enemy. She's my wife, Jack shouted, drawing glances from the bar. Not for long, Harrison replied, and when she is no longer your wife, you will be a man with a meaningless degree, a tarnished name, and no money. Do not call me again until you have signed whatever papers she puts in front of you. The trust will be in touch regarding your removal as a beneficiary. Goodbye, Jackson. The line went dead. Jack sat in the stale, dark bar, surrounded by the ghosts of his own making. The dream house Lenore owned, the baby that never was, the family name he'd disgraced, the fortune he'd lived off and mocked. It was all gone. The only thing left was the bill, and it was coming due. He pulled out the crumpled envelope from Chloe. He looked at the lawyer's number scribbled on the back. Then he pulled out another business card, the paper thick and expensive. Victoria Sterling, ESQ, Lenore's Pitbull. His hand shook. The chasm between the two numbers was the span of his entire life. One was a desperate, doomed grift that would only sink him deeper. The other was surrender. With fingers numbed from cold, he couldn't blame on the air conditioning. He dialed. The phone rang once, twice. Sterling, Cox, and Valdez. Ms. Sterling's office. A polite voice answered. Jack took a shuddering breath, the last of his pride evaporating like alcohol on the bar top. This is Jack Reynolds, he said, his voice a hollow whisper. I need to speak to my wife's lawyer. The call to Victoria Sterling's office was the white flag, the surrender. Jack sat in Mick Dobbs's sparse office 2 days later, the air thick with the smell of cheap coffee and defeat. Mick was on speakerphone with Victoria, his bulldog demeanor replaced by the weary tone of a man managing a retreat. So, we're in agreement. Victoria's crisp voice came through. Your client will accept the terms as laid out in the revised settlement. The spousal support as calculated per the prenup's formula for marriages under 10 years. The division of the known joint assets as previously itemized, and the relinquishment of any claim to Elysian Living or its subsidiaries. In return, we will not pursue claims for restitution of the funds funneled to Ms. Davenport, provided full accounting is given. Mick looked at Jack, who gave a single, stiff nod. Yes, we agree. My client wishes to expedite this. A wise choice, Victoria said, and the words were a clinical verdict. We'll messenger the final papers to Mr. Reynolds's current address by end of day. Jack left Mick's office feeling numb. It was over. He'd signed away his life for a pittance. But it was a pittance that would at least keep a roof over his head. A modest roof. In a neighborhood without a zip code that impressed people. He drove to his new, permanent residence, a one-bedroom apartment in El Segundo. The roar of LAX a constant, dreary soundtrack. The walls were bare, except for one thing. His framed USC diploma, hanging slightly crooked above a second-hand couch. A monument to what he was, or what he'd been. The first crack in the fragile piece came the next morning. An email from his employer, a mid-tier commercial real estate firm where he held the title of Senior Vice President. Strategic Partnerships, a title secured. He now understood with crushing clarity. After Lenore had casually mentioned his networking prowess to the firm's managing partner at a charity gala. Subject, meeting request. Jack, please see me in my office at 9 a.m. sharp. Howard Brenner, the managing partner. A Trojan. Jack felt a flicker of irrational hope. Maybe it was about a new project. Maybe the alumni bond still meant something. At 9:05 a.m., he sat across from Howard, who didn't offer coffee. Howard's face was grim. Jack, we've got a problem. Howard, look, if this is about the personal stuff in the news, I assure you, it's being resolved. It's a private matter. It became a company matter when this arrived. Howard slid a tablet across the desk. On it was an email. The sender's address was anonymous. A jumble of letters and numbers. The subject line, R.E. Jack Reynolds's qualifications. The body was brief, with attachments to the partners of Brenner Styles. You may wish to verify the claims on the attached resume, submitted by your employee, Jackson Reynolds. Specifically, the stated lead role in the University Village redevelopment project, a student housing initiative he cited as senior project experience. Public records show his fraternity. Sigma Chi participated in a volunteer landscaping day. He was not on the planning committee. The claim of managing a $2 million budget for the USC Alumni Association's annual fundraiser. The treasurer for that year has provided a sworn affidavit attached, stating Mr. Reynolds' role was limited to securing liquor sponsorships, and the budget he managed was a $15,000 bar tab. Various other embellishments regarding his postgraduate consulting work. Given the sensitive nature of your client relationships and the importance of integrity, I felt compelled to inform you. A concerned Trojan. Jack's blood ran cold. The resume, the one he'd polished for years, the one that built the myth of Jack Reynolds, business titan, he'd inflated, blurred, and outright invented. Everyone did it, but someone had fact-checked every line, meticulously, vindicatively. This is harassment. Jack stammered, his face burning. A malicious attack from my soon-to-be ex-wife. It's not admissible. The treasurer's affidavit is notarized. Jack, Howard said, his voice cold. I made 2 calls, to the University Housing Office and to the Alumni Association's former CFO. The stories don't match your resume. They match the email. He leaned back, steepling his fingers. Our clients trust us with multi-million-dollar deals. Trust is the product. You've just been revealed as a counterfeit. I have no choice. The board has voted. You're terminated. Effective immediately. Security will escort you to clear your desk. Howard, wait. 20 years. I'm a Trojan. You can't do this. Howard's eyes turned to stone. The only Trojan spirit in this room is the one that demands we not tolerate liars. Clean out your desk. Jack, the walk of shame past the rows of silent, staring colleagues was a blur. The security guard, a hulking man who didn't meet his eyes, stood by as he dumped a USC mug, a stress ball shaped like a football, and a few files into a cardboard box. His key card was deactivated before he reached the elevator. Back in the echo chamber of his apartment, the full weight of it crashed down. No job, a settlement that was a fraction of his old monthly burn rate. The alimony wouldn't cover this. He was bleeding out. His phone rang. The caller ID showed USC Alumni Association. For a wild second, he thought it was a retraction, an apology. He answered, "Hello, Jack Reynolds?" A woman's voice, official and devoid of warmth. "Yes, this is Cynthia from the Alumni Board's Disciplinary Committee. We're convening an emergency session regarding your Young Trojan Award revocation and your general standing. The board has received significant correspondence from other alumni regarding your recent conduct. We'd like you to join the call to offer any final comment before we vote on potential further action." "Further action?" Jack croaked. "You already took the award. What more is there? Suspension or permanent revocation of alumni privileges," Cynthia stated. "Access to the Career Center, networking events, the alumni directory, stadium ticket priority. The board is particularly concerned about the fraudulent representations on your professional profile, which have now become public and reflect poorly on the university. They were excommunicating him, cutting him off from the very tribe that defined him. I want to speak to the board. Put me on." A few clicks, and he was on a conference line. He could hear the murmur of voices, the clearing of throats. He recognized some of them. Powerful voices. "Jack, this is Tom Henderson, board president. You have 2 minutes." Jack's mind raced. He had to appeal to their loyalty. "Tom, everyone, this is a witch hunt. My wife, she's vengeful. She's targeting everything I hold dear because I dared to leave. These allegations are twisted, out of context. Jack, it's Eleanor Walsh." The dean's voice cut through, calm and lethal. "I reviewed the materials. The affidavit from our former treasurer is quite clear. You lied, Jack, not just to your employer. You used the university's name, It's projects to build a false credential that is a violation of the Alumni Code of Ethics. It undermines the value of every real degree we confer. Dean Walsh. Please. Another voice. Gravelly and familiar. Darren Des Johnson. Yeah, I'm on the board now. Jack, community rep, let me ask you something. That time you called me for tickets to the Rose Bowl for your big client. That client was Lenore's fabric supplier, wasn't it? And you told me it was for the mayor? I checked. You used my name, my access, to score points with your wife's vendor. That's weak. Man, that's not Trojan spirit. That's using the family. Jack was drowning. It's business. Everyone networks. There's networking. And there's parasitism, said another voice to the owner of the surf brand. Jack, you took from the network, from your wife, and you gave back stories about how great you were. The vote is clear to me. Tom Henderson spoke again. We've heard enough. The motion on the floor is permanent revocation of all privileged alumni status, pending a 5-year review. All in favor? A chorus of ayes echoed down the line. Unanimous. Motion carries. Mr. Reynolds, you will receive formal notification. Goodbye. The dial tone was the sound of a door slocking shut on the last room in the house of his identity. The next blow came from an unexpected direction. Chloe, cornered and desperate after Jack's surrender, left her with no payout, made her move. She went to the one outlet she thought would listen. A sleazy, pay-for-play celebrity gossip podcast. The raw feed. In a tearful, rambling interview, she spun a tale of a torrid, years-long affair with a captain of industry, manipulated and then cruelly abandoned by him and his vindictive, emotionally barren wife who had hounded her into a corner. He promised me everything. She sobbed for the mic, and then she found out, and she used all her money, all her power, to destroy me. She took my gallery. She threatened me. I was pregnant with his child. And the stress. I lost it. Because of her. It was the performance of her life. Melodramatic and perfectly aimed at the lowest common denominator. It worked. For about 6 hours. The story got traction. Tabloid headlines blared. Beverly Hills revenge. Wife's ruthless crusade destroys mistress. The comments sections were a predictable sewer. Lenore's response was not a statement. It was a data dump. At precisely 10 a.m. the next morning, Victoria Sterling held a press conference on the steps of the courthouse. She did not take questions. She made a single, brief statement. My client, Lenore Thorne, will not dignify the salacious and demonstrably false allegations made by Ms. Chloe Davenport with a detailed rebuttal. However, in the interest of absolute transparency, we have filed a civil suit for fraud and intentional interference with contractual relations against Ms. Davenport. The complaint, along with all supporting evidence, is a public record. We encourage the media to read it. The evidence was a digital tsunami. Reporters scrambled to download the filing. It contained the full, unedited security footage from the wine cellar with timestamps, the bank records tracing the art investment money to Chloe's rent, the sworn statement from the physician's assistant at the clinic, detailing Chloe's scheduled procedure and her stated reasons, audio recording, legally obtained in California. Copies of the extortionate text messages Chloe had sent to Jack demanding money for the baby, and the pièce de résistance, a report from a forensic art investigator hired by Lenore's lawyers months ago, concluding that 3 paintings sold by Chloe's now-defunct gallery to elderly collectors were high-value forgeries. The report included emails from Chloe knowingly authenticating them. By noon, the narrative had utterly flipped. Chloe wasn't a victim. She was a grifter, a blackmailer, and an alleged art fraudster. The DA's office, prompted by the very public filing, opened a criminal investigation. Cops showed up at her hotel room that afternoon. The footage of Chloe Davenport being led away in handcuffs, a designer jacket over her head, played on every local news channel. The podcast, host issued a groveling apology. Jack watched it on the tiny screen in his apartment, a hollow laugh escaping him. She'd played Chloe perfectly, let her hang herself with the longest rope imaginable. The final, brutal orchestration came in family court, for what was supposed to be a routine final settlement hearing. Jack, now representing himself because he couldn't afford Mick anymore, stood before Judge Wilkins. Lenore sat beside Victoria, poised and silent. The agreement appears to be in order. Judge Wilkins said, reviewing the document, Mr. Reynolds, you understand that by signing this, you are waiving any and all future claims against Ms. Thorne's separate property, including her business interests? Yes, Your Honor. Jack mumbled. Very well. I'll make the order. Your Honor. Victoria interjected, smoothly. If it pleases the court, before we conclude, there is one minor, related matter, a symbol, if you will. My client's soon-to-be ex-husband has, throughout the proceedings, placed great emphasis on the trappings of traditional education. He belittled her achievements because they did not come with a specific crest on the wall. She placed a single piece of paper on the clerk's desk. This is for the record, a copy of an offer letter. The Massachusetts Institute of Technology has invited Ms. Thorne to join their School of Engineering as a professor of practice in digital entrepreneurship. The role is contingent on her continuing to run her company. It is, they wrote, a hybrid model they are pioneering for those who are rewriting the code of industry in real time. Victoria looked directly at Jack. She won't be teaching in a classroom. She'll be teaching online, globally, the very medium he scorned. The judge took the letter. Read it, and a faint, knowing smile touched her lips. Noted for the record. Congratulations, Ms. Thorne. It seems some institutions are evolving to recognize talent, regardless of its mailing address. She turned her gaze to Jack. The settlement is approved. This marriage is dissolved. You are free to go, Mr. Reynolds. Both of you. Jack stood frozen as the judge left the bench. Lenore stood, gathering her things. As she passed him, she didn't look at him, but she paused. For the briefest second, that diploma on your wall. Jack, she said, her voice so quiet only he could hear. It's just paper. The real education is what you do with it. You never learned that. And then she was gone. The click of her heels fading down the marbled hallway. He walked out of the courthouse into the blinding LA sun. Paparazzi, there for the spectacle, swarmed, shouting questions. Jack, how do you feel? Any regret? What's next? He pushed through them, head down, heading for the parking garage. He fumbled for the keys to his last remaining asset, a 5-year-old BMW. As he approached, he stopped. A bright orange sticker was plastered on the driver's side window. Notice of impound, asset seizure, lien holder, Elysian Commercial Capital. He stared at it. Elysian Commercial Capital, one of Lenore's holding companies. The car, the last tangible piece of the life he'd lost. She'd owned the loan, and she'd called it in. A tow truck was already rumbling around the corner, its yellow lights flashing. The driver hopped out, holding a tablet. Jackson Reynolds, this vehicle is being repossessed. Step away, please. The cameras clicked and whirred, capturing every humiliating second. The disbelief on his face, the tow hook latching onto his BMW, the car being dragged away like scrap metal. He was left standing on the hot asphalt, holding a key fob to nothing, the eyes of the world upon him. He had nothing, no job, no tribe, no car, no wife, no story about himself that anyone believed anymore. The unraveling was complete. All that was left was the man underneath. And for the first time in his adult life, Jack Reynolds had no idea who that was. The Phoenix Protocol is now in its primary execution phase, Victoria said, placing a tablet on the polished conference table. Asset freeze. Complete. Social dismantling. Complete. Legal dismemberment. In progress. Your ex-husband is functionally extinct as a social and financial entity. I looked at the data streams on the wall-mounted screens in my new office, a minimalist space in a discreet Santa Monica tower. All glass and quiet efficiency. One screen tracked Elysian stock, steady and strong. Another showed real-time metrics from the Malibu campus development. A third was a muted news feed, currently showing a grainy photo of Jack leaving a convenience store, looking hollow-eyed. Good, I said. Now we build. Phase 2 begins. The optics shift from wronged wife to visionary founder. I want the narrative to be about the future, not the past. Across from me, Marcus Chin, my COO and the only person from the early days who never flinched when I mentioned an online course, nodded. The Elysian Institute's accelerator program is ready to launch. We've selected the first cohort, 20 founders. 17 are women. 16 are from non-traditional educational backgrounds. 2 are former Uber drivers. 1 is a single mom who coded her prototype during night shifts as an ER nurse. Perfect, I said. That's the story. Not my story. Theirs. We're the platform. I turned to Sarah, my head of PR. No more interviews about the divorce. All inquiries get steered to the Institute, to the new venture fund, the Lenore Thorne Capital Fund. Focus. Undervalued founders overlooked by the Ivy League pipeline. The Wall Street Journal is interested in the fund's thesis. Sarah said, they're calling it the anti-pedigree portfolio. Let them. I allowed myself a small smile. The very thing Jack used as a weapon was becoming my brand. Now, the personal asset reclamation. Status? Victoria tapped her tablet. The Malibu property is retitled solely in your name. The vineyard in Sonoma is under new management, reporting a 20% increase in yield. The brewery is a problem. Fortitude's sales have tanked since Jack's association became public. The Trojan Brew marketing now carries a stench. I thought for a moment. Rebrand it. Fortitude. The unfiltered craft. Lean into the controversy. Run an ad campaign about starting over. Real character. No false pretenses. Donate a percentage to the Institute's fund. If it fails, we write it off. If it succeeds, it's poetic. Marcus chuckled. Cold. I like it. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Lenore, it's Ben Alder. We met briefly at the Getty Conservation Gala last year. You mentioned the Oxyrhynchus papyri digitization project. I'm in LA for a symposium. Would you have time for coffee? I have a proposal that might align with your new institute's goals. No obligation. Of course. Ben Alder, archaeology professor, University of Chicago. I'd read his paper on using spectral imaging to recover faded palimpsests. It was brilliant. At the gala, he'd been the only person not talking about money or status. He'd been passionately describing the challenge of preserving a Roman grocery list on a piece of broken pottery. I'd found it refreshing. I'd also done a quiet background check. His work was groundbreaking, but he was considered a maverick in stodgy academic circles, sidelined for not having come up through Oxford or Cambridge. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., the cafe at the Hammer Museum. Send the details of your proposal ahead of time. I typed back. Always do the reading before the meeting. The cafe at the Hammer was quiet. Ben Alder looked younger than his 45 years, with an intensity in his eyes that wasn't about ambition, but about curiosity. He stood as I approached. Lenore, thank you for coming. I wasn't sure you'd remember. I remember the grocery list, I said, sitting. Lucius was bad at math. What's your proposal? He blinked, then laughed. Straight to it. Okay. He pulled out a simple laptop. My team has developed a low-cost, high-resolution multispectral imaging rig. We can use it to read erased texts, map archaeological sites from the air, analyze pigment degradation. The tech is there. The funding from traditional academic grants is not. It's not sexy enough. They'd rather fund another dig in a famous location led by a famous name. And you want my non-sexy money? I said, I want a partnership. He corrected. Your new institute. You're talking about applied. project-based learning. Let's create a field lab. We take students that you're non-traditional. My disaffected grad students and we deploy. A wildfire-razed area in Northern California with suspected indigenous artifacts. A historical society in Cleveland with a basement full of unreadable ledgers. We go. We scan. We digitize. We preserve. We publish the findings open source. The students get real, messy, groundbreaking field experience. The communities get their history back. My tech gets proven at scale. I watched him as he spoke. His passion was a tangible thing, a clean, bright flame next to the murky, ego-driven fires I was used to. You were passed over for tenure at Chicago. I stated. It wasn't a question. He didn't flinch. Yes, my publication record is too interdisciplinary. My methods are unorthodox. I don't give a damn about tenure. I care about the work. I hear you might understand that. I did. More than he could know. Send the full proposal, budget, and tech specs to my assistant. If the numbers hold, you'll have your pilot funding and a wing at the Malibu Institute. The Alder Wing will find the students. He stared at me, momentarily speechless. Just like that, due diligence first. But the principle stands. I'm in the business of building new pipes, not begging for a drink from old wells. I stood. It was good to see you. Ben, send the paperwork. As I walked away, I felt a sensation I hadn't in years. The simple, uncomplicated spark of a new idea, with no shadow attached to it. The shadow, however, was busy decomposing. Jack's new life was a series of small, corrosive humiliations. He'd gotten a job. After a month of rejections, a friend of a friend's cousin ran a community college extension program in the valley. They needed an adjunct to teach introduction to business principles. The pay was dismal. The classroom smelled of old linoleum and despair. He stood before 20 listless students, most of whom were there for the credit, not the knowledge. He wrote Jack Reynolds, MBA on the whiteboard. The MBA felt like a lie now. Today, we'll discuss the fundamentals of organizational behavior. He began, his voice echoing in the half-empty room, drawing from my experience in corporate strategic partnerships. A kid in the back, wearing headphones, didn't look up. Another was openly scrolling on her phone. A third, an older man, raised his hand. Yeah, Professor, I looked you up. You're that guy from the news, the one whose wife took everything because you were banging that art lady. So, is this going to be about that? 'Cause that's more interesting than organizational whatever. The class tittered. Jack's face burned. That is irrelevant to the coursework. He said tightly. Seems pretty relevant to business principles. The man shot back. Don't shit where you eat, right? The laughter was louder now. Jack's authority, already brittle, shattered. He spent the rest of the hour reading haltingly from the textbook, avoiding all eye contact. The student reviews at the end of the first week were savage. Dude is a joke. Seems like he failed business 101 in real life. Worst part of my Tuesday. After class, he stopped at a rundown grocery store. The fluorescent lights buzzed as he reached for the cheap, store-brand coffee. He looked up at a small TV mounted above the registers. It was tuned to a financial news channel. There I was, in a studio, being interviewed. The cheer read, Lenore Thorne, CEO, turning Traditional into a trillion-dollar thesis. The interviewer, a polished woman, leaned forward. So, the core of your new fund is betting on people the traditional system overlooks. Is that personal? I smiled. A calm, assured expression. Experience is the best teacher. I learned that credentials can be a wall as easily as a door. My fund is about finding the people climbing the walls. They often have a better view. And your personal life? The very public divorce? Does that factor into your drive? I didn't blink. I prefer to focus on building the future. The past is just data. I've analyzed it, learned from it, and moved on to more interesting problems. Like how to teach an archaeologist to read a 2.000-year-old receipt using a modified drone. That's a current project. It's fascinating. The interviewer looked momentarily thrown, then laughed. From divorce to ancient receipts. That's quite a pivot. It's all information, I said, my gaze steady on the camera. It's all about what you choose to do with it. Jack stood there, holding the dusty can of coffee, watching me be eloquent, powerful, and utterly free of him. I was talking about ancient trash, and it sounded more vital than anything he'd done in a decade. A woman in line behind him sighed. God, she's amazing. To come out of that mess like that. He must be such a loser. He didn't turn around. He just put the coffee back on the shelf, left his basket in the middle of the aisle, and walked out into the bleached valley sun. The heat felt like a judgment. His phone vibrated. An email from his father's estate lawyer, Mr. Reynolds. Pursuant to the instructions of Harrison Reynolds III, please be advised that you have been formally removed as a beneficiary of the Reynolds Family Trust. Any future distributions are hereby terminated. Your personal effects from the Newport Beach estate have been boxed and are available for pickup at a storage facility in Irvine. The bill is enclosed. Sincerely, Gregory Finch, ESQ. He leaned against the grody stucco wall of the supermarket, the last thread of his birthright severed. He had nothing. No family money. No family name that meant anything. No legacy but failure. He thought of Chloe, awaiting trial, of his diploma, hanging in his sad apartment, of my face on the TV, talking about drones and receipts, of the student's voice. He must be such a loser. The protocol was complete. The phoenix had risen from the ash of his arrogance, and he was what was left on the cold ground. Not even ash. Just empty, howling air. The air in Department 24 of the Los Angeles Superior Court was stale, recycled, and thick with finality. This wasn't a mediation. This was the bench trial for the final dissolution and asset division, the last square on the board. Jack sat at the petitioner's table with his new lawyer, a weary-looking public defender named Luis Garcia, assigned to him after his funds ran too low for even McDobbs. Garcia looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Jack himself was wearing a suit that was a season out of date and slightly too big, hanging on a frame that had shed weight from stress and cheap food. I sat with Victoria. We were a study in calm precision. Judge Eleanor Wilkins took the bench, her gaze sweeping the room. We are here on Thorne versus Reynolds for final adjudication. I've read the briefs. I've seen the settlement agreement Mr. Reynolds signed. My understanding is he is now contesting the validity of that agreement and making new claims regarding hidden assets. Mr. Garcia, you have the floor. Be brief. Luis Garcia stood, adjusting his ill-fitting suit coat. Thank you, Your Honor. My client contests the agreement on grounds of duress and unilateral mistake. He was under severe emotional and financial pressure when he signed. Furthermore, we allege the respondent, Ms. Thorne, systematically concealed the true nature and extent of her separate property, specifically her role in various ventures, which constituted fraud upon the community. Your Honor, Victoria said, not bothering to stand. The duress was of his own making, the consequence of his own infidelity and financial malfeasance being revealed. The mistake was his own ignorance, willful or otherwise, and the hidden assets were separate property, accrued pre-marriage, with no duty of disclosure beyond what was already provided in discovery, which was exhaustive. Judge Wilkins nodded. Mr. Garcia, you'll need more than adjectives. What's your first witness? The petitioner, Your Honor, Jack Reynolds. Jack took the stand, swearing on the Bible. He looked at me, a flicker of the old defiance in his eyes. This was his last stand. Garcia began. Mr. Reynolds, why did you sign the settlement agreement? I was backed into a corner. Jack said, his voice stronger than I had expected. My reputation was being destroyed. My wife, Ms. Thorne, and her lawyers were threatening to expose private things, to bankrupt me. I felt I had no choice. And these separate assets at the Malibu land, the various investments, were you aware of them during the marriage? No. Not at all. She presented herself as the creative mind. I was the business strategist. Or so I thought. She hid these things. She let me believe I was contributing, building something with her, when she was just using me for social cover, I guess. While she built an empire in secret, the narrative was clear. He was the duped partner, not the deadbeat. Garcia sat. Your witness. Victoria stood, buttoning her blazer. She approached the stand slowly. Mr. Reynolds, you claim you were unaware of your wife's business acumen and holdings. Did you ever ask to see her tax returns? Well, not specifically. We had accountants. Did you ever ask about her day? What she was working on? Of course. But she'd talk about fabrics, designs, photo shoots, and you dismissed that as decorator talk, correct? Victoria's voice was mild. I valued it differently. You belittled it, publicly, correct? She didn't wait for an answer. She walked to our table and picked up a tablet. Let's talk about the Malibu parcel. You testified you were unaware she owned it. Yet, in a recorded conversation from July 12th, 2022, she tapped the screen. The audio filled the court. Jack's voice, annoyed. I'm telling you, Lenore, the Paragon Point deal is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. The guys at the club are all over it. It's the ultimate Trojan retreat. My voice, calm. The geological survey shows unsustainable erosion. The water rights are a 10-year litigation waiting to happen. It's a bad investment. Jack, emotion over economics. Jack, there you go again with your spreadsheets. You have no vision, no sense of legacy. It's not about the money. It's about the statement. Me. My statement is a balanced portfolio. That land is a liability. Let it go. Victoria paused the recording. You discussed it. She advised against it. Citing due diligence, you ignored. Where is the concealment? Jack's jaw tightened. She didn't say she was buying it. She had no obligation to. It was her capital, her risk, just as it was your capital, your risk, that you poured into Art Venture LLC to pay Chloe Davenport's rent. An investment you did disclose to her, correct? Objection. Garcia called out. Relevance. Overruled. It goes to pattern of financial disclosure. Counselor, answer the question. Mr. Reynolds. Jack's shoulders slumped. Yes, I told her it was an art fund that leased an apartment, and you listed that on your joint tax filings. She saw it. She just, unlike you, read the details. Victoria let that hang. Now, your claim of being the business strategist. Let's examine a specific piece of strategy. The expansion of Elysian living into the UK market in 2023. Who made the final go/no-go decision? We discussed it. The board minutes. Victoria said, pulling up another document on the tablet. Show you were recused from the vote due to a conflict of interest at your friendship with the potential and ultimately unsuccessful logistics partner. The go decision was made by the CEO, Lenore Thorne, based on a market analysis she commissioned from a firm at Cambridge University, a firm you later described to your friends as my UK contacts. Did you create that analysis, Mr. Reynolds? The color drained from his face. No. Did you even read it? A long pause. No. So, your strategic contribution was what? Exactly? The idea that Europe sounded good? Her tone was surgical. Let's talk education. Since you've made that a cornerstone of your disdain, you hold a Bachelor of Science in Business Administration from USC, a fine degree. Ms. Thorne holds a series of certificates from Wharton Online, MIT Sloan, and Harvard Business School's Executive Education Program. You called these printed-off internet certificates. Are you aware that the professor who taught her MIT Disruptive Strategy course, Dr. Ethan Moore, is considered the leading academic in the field? I don't know who that is. Of course you don't, because you don't value the education. You value the branding. She switched the screen. This is a peer-reviewed paper published in the Journal of Business Venturing. Co-authors, Dr. Ethan Moore and Lenore Thorne. It's a case study on Elysian's supply chain innovation. It has been cited over 200 times. Did you read your wife's seminal academic work, Mr. Reynolds? He stared, mute, at the citation list on the screen. It was a world that had existed alongside him, invisible and vast. I'll take that as a no, Victoria said. Your claim of building a shared dream with your shared language rings hollow, doesn't it? You didn't speak her language. You never tried to learn. You were too busy being the teacher in a subject she'd already mastered. She turned to the judge. No further questions. Your Honor. Judge Wilkins looked at Garcia. Redirect? Garcia stood, flustered. Mr. Reynolds, is it not true that regardless of these details, the culture of your marriage, the social framework you provided, was integral to her comfort and ability to operate? Jack seized on it. Yes, I provided the stability, the normalcy, the college football weekends, the alumni dinners, the life. She couldn't have done it without that foundation. It was a pathetic plea, and everyone knew it. Your Honor. The respondent calls one rebuttal witness. Victoria said, Chloe Davenport. A murmur went through the sparse courtroom. Chloe was brought in from a side door, dressed in a plain, state-issued jumper, hands cuffed. A bailiff escorted her to the stand. She looked at Jack with pure, unadulterated hatred. Garcia was on his feet. Objection. This witness is a convicted felon. Her credibility. She's been sworn in. Mr. Garcia, Judge Wilkins said, and her testimony is narrowly tailored to the issue of the culture and stability Mr. Reynolds claims to have provided. Proceed. Ms. Sterling. Victoria approached. Ms. Davenport, you had an intimate relationship with Mr. Reynolds during his marriage. Yes. Did he ever express to you that he provided stability or a supportive social framework for his wife? Chloe let out a short, bitter laugh. No, he said she was a millstone, a boring, social climbing decorator who embarrassed him in front of his real friends. He said marrying her was the biggest mistake of his life. But at least her money meant he didn't have to suck up to his dad anymore. He said the only good thing about their life was the house, and he couldn't wait to sell it and move to Venice with me. Her words were flat, venomous. He said she was so focused on her little projects that she'd never even notice he was gone. He called her, what was it? A rich, hot golden retriever who pays the bills. That was the stability he talked about. Her checkbook. The silence was absolute. Jack had gone corpse gray. No further questions. Victoria said, returning to her seat. Garcia had no questions. There were none to ask. Judge Wilkins adjusted her glasses. I've heard enough. The court finds the settlement agreement entered into by Mr. Reynolds was knowing, voluntary, and under no legally cognizable duress other than the entirely predictable consequences of his own actions. The claim of concealed assets is dismissed with prejudice. The respondent's separate property was just that separate, and Mr. Reynolds's willful ignorance of his spouse's accomplishments is not a legal defect. As for the division of community property, she read the terms. They were exactly as in the settlement. Jack got the debt from his failed ventures. I got everything else. He was ordered to pay a portion of my legal fees due to the frivolity of his last-minute claims. Finally, Judge Wilkins said, removing her glasses, Mr. Reynolds, this court has spent considerable time on a case that, at its heart, is about one man's profound and petulant insecurity. You valued a piece of paper and a network of handshakes over the tangible genius and character of the woman you married. You mistook her quiet competence for emptiness and her patience for permission. The law can divide assets. It cannot grant you the wisdom or respect you failed to earn. This marriage is dissolved. Court is adjourned. The gavel cracked. Jack didn't move. He just Saturday shattered. As the bailiff told him he had to leave, I stood, gathering my things. As I walked past his table, he finally looked up, his eyes red-rimmed. You set all that up. The paper, the recording. Chloe, you planned this. I stopped, looking down at him. I didn't plan your choices. Jack, I just stopped protecting you from them. The checkmate was yours. You walked your king right into it, boasting about your knights and bishops the whole time. I leaned in slightly, my voice dropping. The golden retriever line. That was the one. You know, that's when I stopped seeing a husband and started seeing a liability. A liability to be managed. And then excised. I walked away, Victoria at my side, through the doors and into the bustling hallway. Paparazzi were there, but they were held back by court officers. Shouted questions blended into noise. Ms. Thorne, any comment? Are you celebrating? What's next? I didn't answer. I just kept walking toward the elevator, toward the rest of my life, leaving the husk of the past in the quiet. Terrible silence of the courtroom behind me. The game was over, and I had never really been playing against him at all. 6 months later, the cover of Time magazine hit the newsstands. The image was stark, powerful. Me, Lenore Thorne, standing on the raw, wind-swept bluff of the Malibu campus, looking not at the camera, but at the half-finished, glass and steel structure behind me. The headline read, "The architect of her own domain. Lenore Thorne and the unlikely Ivy League." I placed the magazine on the teak table of my new Santa Monica home, that's smaller than the Beverly Hills mansion. All light and ocean air, with no trace of anyone's memory but my own. My phone buzzed incessantly with congratulatory texts, but I'd silenced it. The only notification I saw was an email from Ben Alder, with the subject line, Oxyrhynchus fragment number 1174, it's a recipe. For fish stew, incredibly bland fish stew. A smile touched my lips. I typed a reply, funding approved for Phase 2, tell the team, and send me the recipe. For historical curiosity, my assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Thorne, the car is ready for the Institute's opening ceremony, and a delivery arrived for you. Personal. On my doorstep was a long, narrow cardboard tube. No return address. Inside, protected by layers of tissue, was not a document, but an object. A simple, worn wooden ruler, the kind used in drafting. Taped to it was a note in elegant, old-fashioned handwriting. Lenore, I saw the article. Your father would have been immensely proud. He used this ruler to draw his first blueprints for the shop. He believed the only measure of a person was what they built. It seems you inherited that. I am sorry I allowed other, lesser measures to cloud my view. Harrison Reynolds 3. I ran my fingers over the smooth, worn wood. It felt like an apology and an absolution from the most unlikely source. I placed it on my bookshelf, next to a model of the Elysian Institute. The campus was alive with energy. Students in casual clothes that ranging from eager 20-year-olds to a determined-looking woman in her 50s moved between the pavilions, clutching tablets and sample cases. There was no ivy, no neoclassical columns. The architecture was clean, open, designed for collaboration, not quiet worship. I stood at the edge of the central courtyard with Ben, watching the controlled chaos. He was squinting at a drone that was being prepped for a field scan of a nearby coastal erosion site. It's different, he said, not looking at me. The energy. They're not here for a grade. They're here to fix something. The woman from the EPA. She's trying to map contaminant runoff. The kid from Inglewood wants to use our imaging tech to find structural weaknesses in old housing projects. It's gloriously pragmatic. That was the point. I said, no theoretical problems, just real ones. He finally looked at me, a question in his eyes that had nothing to do with archaeology. And your real problem, is it fixed? I met his gaze. I'm not a problem to be fixed anymore. I'm a project under construction, a much more interesting state of being. A young woman with purple streaks in her hair, a first cohort Elysian fellow, hurried over, slightly breathless. Ms. Thorne, the Today Show crew is set up at the main lecture hall, and there's a family here to see you. They're insistent. The family was a group of 4, looking slightly overwhelmed. The mother stepped forward. Ms. Thorne, I'm Carla. This is my daughter, Maya. She pushed a shy teenager forward. She got the full ride scholarship, the one for young women in STEM from non-college families. We drove up from San Diego. We just wanted to thank you in person. Maya hasn't